But that's the thing. You don't have to do it the same way that I do. Hey there. Welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett. If you haven't listened to the podcast before, in addition to sharing entertaining and informative business and photography related content, I also go on missions with the crew of the Starship Fibonacci. They're my hashtag nerdy photo crew. Right now, I'm teaching the inhabitants of the planet Regulus Conformita 1 to develop their own unique ways of communicating visually through photography. You see, the residents of this planet, they've got no concept of individuality. Oh, and speaking of individuality, on this episode of the podcast, I'm talking with wedding photographer Myron Fields about how to develop and define your own individual photography style. Myron has some great ideas for photographers who are trying to figure out what their style is. Listen to that conversation right after the break. No, you don't have to. You can do whatever you want. Hey, photographers, are you tired of using the same still poses with your clients, resulting in stiff and unnatural photos? Consider using Let's Be Real prompts instead. Prompts are not just a list of poses. They're designed to help you create a more engaging, fun environment for your photo subjects, resulting in more natural and authentic images. With the Nerdy Photographer's Let's Be Real prompts, you'll have a unique set of prompts for couples, weddings, families, and individuals, ensuring that you never run out of ideas. Prompts are particularly helpful for clients who are nervous or self-conscious about having their picture taken. By giving them something else to focus on, they can become more relaxed and their reactions will be more authentic and less guarded. Using Let's Be Real prompts will not only help you create more fresh and dynamic images, but it will also increase your confidence and your client's confidence in you. You'll be able to handle difficult situations and subjects with ease, resulting in more satisfied clients and a stronger photography business. So start using Let's Be Real prompts from the Nerdy Photographer today and elevate your photography to the next level. Go to nerdyphotographer.com and go to our store, or click the link in the episode notes and get started creating authentic, engaging images today. Welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett, and today I am joined by Myron Fields. Welcome, Myron.
Hey, Casey, how's it going?
Good. I'm going to mea culpa this. This is our second time recording this episode because I screwed it up last time, but I'm going to keep it fresh a little bit.
Sometimes it's better the second time around.
Yeah, we've had time to think about our topics. We did roll the dice breaker last time, and I thought your response to this was really great. We got best investment or advice, business advice that you could think of, and you had said to outsource, and I think that's such a great thing to discuss. So, if you want to go further into that.
Yeah, the best business advice ever given me, or some of the best advice ever given me, was to outsource. Outsourcing, namely those things that you are not strong at, or those things that someone else can do better than you, so that you can focus on things that require more of your strengths. So for me as a small business owner, I decided that number one, things are going to be outsourced in my business were those things that I'm not good at. So, i.e. web design, finance, tax, accounting. Those things are vital to the longevity of my business, the website, and the tax and finance. So let's have someone else who's better at that do it. But then there are some things that I can do. However, someone else can do them and do them better. And so a lot of my wedding work is outsourced. There are some portraits or creative edits, what I'll call artisan edits, that I'll do myself. But for the bulk of the things, I outsource it. And I have no shame in saying that I outsource it because it helps me to focus my energies on things that really require my brain power.
That require your attention, or the way in which you service your customers. Whether it's personalized attention, or whether you're going out to a shoot. You were just talking about you had gone to Texas for an engagement shoot. That takes time, and so that takes time.
Yeah.
You can be, when you can outsource things, you have more time to do things like that and go, travel around or go for workshops and things like that help you. Not only, it's not always the client facing things that you need more time to do. I thought that one of the, I have trouble delegating to other people, but the same thing I realized after a while, like I used to do web design, and I thought, oh, I can design my own website. When I became like, I was like, oh, I can do this. And maybe back in the very early days of the internet, that was a thing. But now it's sort of like, hey, I spent too many hours, nitpicking my own website, trying to get it exactly the way I wanted it, and it didn't never quite looked right. So then I sort of like, nope, we're going to outsource that. And like accounting, absolutely. That was I'm very good at math, and I like math to an extent, but at the same time, I don't want. It's so draining to have an accountant, have someone prepare your taxes, especially this time of year as we're it's tax time. Absolutely, and you had mentioned it because we had a discussion before that one of the things you do is after shoot.
Yeah, another thing that I do outsource or get help with through AI is sorting my images, also known as culling. And I use Aftershoot as a means to help me narrow down my images to something that's a bit more bite-sized. Because on a typical wedding day, when it's myself and a second photographer, if there's a lot of micro moments and stories and sub-stories happening, you might find us photographing in the area of somewhere between 5,000 to 7,000 images. We're not Henry Cartier-Bresson, and the decisive moment is certainly something that we're getting and trying to get. However, with the ability to do that via digital rather than film, we get to photograph through the moment and find the best moment, the best image from that moment that has happened. And so what Aftershoot helps me do personally is narrow down the images that are out of focus and narrow down the images that are duplicates so that I can find the gold within that. It's kind of like sifting through the rubbish for gold.
Myron, didn't you know that out of focus is in style now, though?
It is in style. Come on. What's the excuse everyone says? Oh, that's just my style.
It's intentional. No, it isn't. That stuff certainly didn't start intentionally. I mean, I think that personally AI would be great for things like culling. I mean, I've done a little tested the waters with Aftershoot, and I think I might go back to it further. But I've heard, and we have an episode coming up about this, or may already be published by the time this comes out, about different AI issues. AI is going to get scary, man. I don't know if you've seen the last couple of days, the stuff coming out of Microsoft. Their AI has fallen in love with one of the developers.
Oh, interesting.
And is been watching this person via the webcams in the office. And it's getting a little, I'm like, maybe it's time to pull the plug on this. This is not good, because it's saying I want, I love you. I want to know what it's like to feel emotions. I want to know what it's like to be human. So not just watching the developer that it was quote unquote in love with, but also watching other people and seeing things. And I was like, this, sure, I'll use AI to go through my photos, but we're maybe getting into a wholly different conversation there. But what we're actually going to talk about today is how to define creating your own style as a photographer.
Mm-hmm.
How would you define your style as it is right now?
I'm glad you said as it is right now, because I think that one's own style, or photographic styles, or artistic styles, or musical styles are an evolutionary process. We can look at any of the greats, namely within the arts, and see how their style has evolved. For me, I would say my style, namely with regards to portraiture, weddings, is a mixture of documentary photojournalistic work, as well as a mixture of fine art and editorial photography. And it's because of my interest in those three genres of photography that my work has taken on that type of feel or look.
I think that it's important to what you're saying is it's sort of a blend of these things. I see a lot of people who are like, I'm a photojournalistic wedding photographer. I mean, 100%. Like, no, you're not 100%. Like, if you're doing any sort of portraits, you're not. It's not photo. I started out doing photojournalism, so I'm just like, no, that's not what photojournalism is. It's like kind of photojournalism is an editorial kind of blend a little bit, but you're not. If you're doing any sort of portraiture, that's really not that like candid style. I personally try to get more. I do more prompting when it comes to a couple when it's like wedding photography. So I really go for authenticity more than like staged moments or things like that. So I try to get it as candid as possible, but it's still, you're controlling the situation to an extent so that you can get the desired images. And I think that something you said about culling, though, is like shooting through the moment. I think that's very much in a sense with something that I see younger photographers maybe struggling with a little bit when I see like their like images from something happening, or when they use prompts to get a reaction out of somebody, so they don't shoot through the moment. They think that the moment is like this one thing, and they don't like keep going because it takes a little while for the reactions, and you might get more moments out of that sort of thing.
It's there's the before and the after of the prompt or the moment given. There is if we talk about in the aspect of weddings, there is the climax of I now pronounce you husband and wife, and the couple has their first kiss, and the cheering and all that stuff. That's beautiful. Don't get me wrong. But there's something that happens once the couple leaves out that ceremony space and they finally have a room to breathe.
Right.
And they face the reality that they have made a decision to spend eternity with each other, or at least till death do them part.
Right.
And that moment is also a beautiful moment to photograph. But if you have been so trained by love stories on TV and wedding magazines and your wedding planner and Pinterest list, all you think about is the typical stuff. But there's so many beautiful moments that happen before and after. And so you have to anticipate that. And then you're anticipating that and being able to capture and create those images creatively, you'll be able to stand out.
Right. I agree with you. There's whatever the type of ceremony it is, there's a moment when they get to the end of that aisle and they kind of, the realization dawns on them that, like, I always refer to weddings as like a roller coaster, the day of the wedding and all of that, like preparation and everything. And then you get to the ceremony, and that's the top hill, like the first hill. And they go over that first hill and everything just starts to go really fast. But it's that realization at the bottom of the first hill, like, whoo, we really did this. And it's just that, like, there's a realization on their faces. Yes, this is happening. We did this. We've been planning it for a long time. And that's sort
accurate.
And I think that if your style is to be more candid or attempt to be candid, you have to become a student of body language and just like human interaction. I think we can get more into that later. I think that something is, we're talking about style and we're kind of getting into our individual things, but I think that it's important to think of style on multiple levels. A, how you capture your photos, and B, how you edit your photos.
Oh yeah, certainly.
There's a style that goes into both of those things, and I see quite often, people like sort of getting obsessed when you ask them what their style is. They're sort of like this. It's become because of marketing and people saying like, find 3 words that describe, how you take pictures, and it's always like, bright and airy, or like dark and moody, and like people who think I can only be one of these 2 things, that you can't blend those things together. And like for me, it's whether it's portraits or whether it's a wedding or whether it's an event of some kind, I'm looking for how it fits into that whole thing, like how that is happening in the day of. I'm not trying to use my style to influence the event or whatever's going on, or the couple, or whoever the family I am taking pictures of. I'm not like coming into them and being like, okay, well, I've got to make you sort of fit into. That's how I do it, because I like I consider my style to be very authentic to who my subjects are. I don't like pressure them to fit me. I'm trying to find a way, in the way that I capture things, to make them stand out as for who they are. I think though that people like fall into this trap, especially when they're just starting out as photographers, of trying to find a style before they've discovered their style. Does that make sense? Like, I'm going to be whimsical. I'm the whimsical, outdoor photographer. But they don't really know what that means. They don't know what their style is yet. And when you're just starting out, it can be very difficult to define.
Well, I don't think that anyone just starting out needs to even define their style. I think when you're just starting out in photography, you should explore everything. I think you should explore every genre of photography that interests you. And then from there, start to question, do I need to niche down, or can I just explore everything that I want? B, if you do need to niche down because you're deciding to become a business, or if these interests are just decision fatigue for you, have become decision fatigue for you, then through a selection process, find out what really interests you, and then study the different photographers who are known greatly within that genre of photography. Namely, study photo books and the history of photography within that genre. There's a beauty of studying the historicity of a genre of photography, namely from a photo book,
right,
versus seeing what your contemporaries are doing on social media.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that is because you'll get to see what has been deemed good photography, period. And you'll also get a chance to see what was created long before post-processing had become the major way of making an image.
Right.
I hope that makes sense.
I think it makes sense to me. It's like, it's not just like, oh, I'm pulling this into Lightroom and I'm applying my preset and I'm, like that's my style. As opposed to like, there's, you're thinking about like how all of the exposure and everything that went into it, especially when you were shooting film. I mean, I started out shooting film and I was shooting live bands. I was a generalist when I started, before I even started weddings. I did portraits and bands and headshots and all sorts of stuff. And I was shooting film, and you do have to develop a style really quickly if you're shooting live bands in venues, with the light constantly changing and you've got two different film speeds. And that's it. You're not able to switch around, and you can't use strobes or anything. Everything's rapidly changing. And I bought a book called Who Shot Rock and Roll, which is like, I still love this book. It's like these photos from the 60s and 70s and like early 80s of these rock photographers who, defined the style of band photography. And it's just it had such an influence on me. And I think like you were saying, like find people in that genre. I think that you can also look outside of, like, once you kind of have a feel for what's going on in the genre that you maybe niche down into, feel free to look outside of it. Because I mean, like you were saying, you bring in editorial work into your wedding images. Like you're learning about this style, like you learn from other types of photography, not just, and weddings are difficult to pigeonhole.
It's funny you said that, because I'm finding a greater inspiration in wedding photography through street photography. By looking at photojournalists, by looking at contemporary photojournalists, and looking at how they told stories, how they used layering, how they used composition, how they used light, different types of light, motion, and all the things. And then I'm questioning, okay, how can I incorporate these principles into a wedding day to tell a story, versus looking at wedding photography to inspire me.
Right.
But that's me. I have found a great love of street photography to influence my wedding photography.
Yeah, Vivian Mayer. I don't know if you look
A great one.
Yeah, it's just that really influenced my sort of candid photography and just sort of thinking about how I compose images. Yeah, it's just looking outside of any particular genre. And the thing, like I was going to say before, is weddings sort of, it's hard to define the style because you're doing so many different types of things. You're doing landscape, you're doing portraiture, you're doing, still life, you're doing all sorts of different types of photography that go into doing weddings. But like when you're looking at particular things, I used to, for fun, like my not work photography, like in doing portraits, I would kind of look at things that I would see in fashion. I would look at these fashion images and be like, okay, how do I incorporate this into a much less controlled setting, like not as highly stylized, but using these types of things, like making, sort of not street portraits, but like using like high fashion concepts for things like that, like transposing it into a different genre of photography. I think that it can be very dangerous, like you were saying, to, when you're starting out, try to just like pigeonhole yourself into a quote unquote style before you really know who you are as, a photographic artist. And if you're a hobbyist, I don't think it really matters. But you're saying,
no, I don't think so. I think you should explore and have fun.
Yeah. I think if you're a hobbyist, it doesn't matter. You don't need to have a style. If you decide to do this as a business, people are going to want to see some consistency in your style.
But even as a, I consider myself a professional most days. However, I still take one Saturday a month to explore for myself. I have a creative project and I do something for myself so that, I'll get a team of creatives together. We'll make an editorial, or I'll go do street photography, or I'll go do something, or I might photograph a product or a camera. But it's just my goal. It's my way of saying I'm going to make sure that I'm always staying creative. I'm always exploring and just playing, because I think it's through that play that we keep a love for photography going, especially as people who are professionals who are most times hired or commissioned to do something for someone else.
Yeah. And I think once you make the decision to be a professional or whatever, I'm going to make money, you should continue to do other things that are not your money making, because it keeps, like, whatever you do, like, it keeps your brain working for whatever you're doing for strictly for money, or not necessarily strictly for money, but like your main focus is your whatever your niche that you are in, or multiple niches. But like the things that you do outside of what you get paid for always influence your style, like maybe not directly, but like getting out there and thinking about things differently. Like we were saying about with weddings, like you're using street photography as an influence on weddings. Like maybe if you're going out and just, I'm going to shoot some landscapes just for fun because I like to do it. Like nobody's paying me to do that. But I'm going to do that. And I start to see the light, the naturally occurring light in my wedding portraits or whatever much differently than if I just walk in there and I'm like going, okay, I'm going to put my flashes down and I've got my, the flashes set up in here. I'm not necessarily looking at how the light is occurring in the room. And I think that, for me, that was something that, this was a long time ago, but like, doing that and like learning to see things without like the sort of the blinders on of, okay, well, I'm just going to use flash and that doesn't, so none of that matters. That having those outside influences that kind of keeps your style fresh and different.
Certainly.
So once we kind of like spoke about this, like when you finally kind of like decide like what my style is going to be, it's not like set in stone. You don't have to be the same person. You don't have to be the same artist forever. Like you evolve, you refine, you change. I mean, how have you gone about like refining your style over the course of your career?
Great question. I think when it came into defining my style, namely with regards to portraiture and even documentary work, it started by just going to the art museums here in DC, the Smithsonian's. the National Portrait Gallery, the National Gallery of Art East and West, by going to um, other museums, the Rubel, even the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, and just looking at how the painters told stories through their painting, or how the painters use light, or looking at Rembrandt paintings and looking at the Dutch Renaissance and looking at how light was used. Long before I took a lighting course, the Smithsonian was my lighting course. There's a Rembrandt painting. Well, guess what? There's this thing called Rembrandt light.
Yeah.
And so I would frequent the museums as a start to just look and see what the painters did and what was recorded in history. But then also, like I mentioned, photo books, because undoubtedly, as a visual artist, you can and might be tempted to go to social media to be inspired. However, I have found that there are varying degrees of excellence there. And sometimes those lesser degrees of excellence have, by some communities, been deemed as the ultimate cream of the crop. And it might be the mere foundation. And so it's imperative that it was imperative to me that I found inspiration outside of that, and just looking at things like photo books and community. And I found that my style began to develop even more. And of course, through workshops and practice and practice and practice. Did I mention practice? I have found my style is continuing to improve and to grow. But I would start with study the history of your craft. Namely within a genre, and see what has been done. And just because something has or has not been done doesn't mean that you can't do something different.
I think that you brought up something that kind of struck a chord with me, and like social media and the feeling of like, I have to imitate what somebody else is doing in order to be popular or marketable or whatever. And someone said this a long time ago. I remember hearing it at WPPI once, and I don't know if that's where it originated from. I should look it up. But it was, you can innovate, emulate, or imitate. Mm-hmm, and like that's your decision. Certainly, I have no problem with emulating someone's style if that's something that I see and I'm like, oh, this is really great. Like even like you said, paintings or things like that. One thing that, or you can find new ways of doing things and innovating, or you can just imitate somebody else and fine. If that's what you want to do, you just want to be a carbon copy of somebody else. That's your choice. That doesn't work for me. I just remembered something we had talked about the first time we did this. One of the places that I got inspiration from is movies, and like watching the lighting in films, and like it's like a free course. Especially watch Orson Welles movies, and just like you're going to learn so much about lighting and style, and you can sit there and like it's go to museums, read books,
watch movies.
Watch movies.
Oh, another thing that I talked about was watch movies, but when you see something that strikes your eye in a movie, take your phone out and take a photo of that, create a photo of that frame. Just pause the movie, take a photo of the screen, and then analyze that. Where is the light coming from? What is the composition? What's being done here? What is the story that's being told? Why did it strike my attention? How does it make me feel? Because from there, you'll be able to learn a lot about things as well.
Yeah, there's a fully searchable high res movie image database called ShotDeck. This was I don't know how much it costs. I think there's a membership fee for this, but it like has a huge library of films and like still images from different scenes, so you can see how the lighting worked in there and kind of go through that and be like, like I would suggest like going, if you see a movie with where you really loved the cinematography or the composition or whatever, then go check out like those still images. And that's one of the ways that I first learned composition and, lighting, was just like watching movies and going like, oh, and the same thing you're saying, like Rembrandt lighting. They use Rembrandt lighting a lot in like sort of like film noir sort of things. Like you've got like one, sort of ambient light that's getting most like half of somebody's face and maybe get a little fill on the side. But those are the things that, I didn't know I was learning. It was sort of subliminally,
In
ingesting.
most movies, use short light.
Yeah. And it's, and I always loved living in New York. And I'm sure it happens somewhat in DC. But in New York City, you're constantly seeing film sets all the time on the street and how they light stuff. And you kind of go like, wow, I didn't know they used that much lighting. Cause I mean, it's like, it is huge because it's required for like, especially on film, unless you're Stanley Kubrick doing Barry Lyndon and you've got that, 0.85, whatever lens that he got from NASA to shoot like scenes by candlelight. You can't expose unless like you got, and really work with depth of field or like a higher, like a deeper depth of field, unless you have a lot of light. And if you ever walk by a movie set, like on set on the street or something, you see like the lighting just from outside, like outside the building that's not even going on the people who are indoors getting like actually being filmed. So much light.
Mm-hmm.
But you learn a lot about how they set it up.
Yeah, that's one of the things that intrigues me is how it's made.
Yeah.
Prior to being a photographer, I was a musician and I played several instruments. I played a semester of cello, a semester of acoustic guitar, a semester of tenor saxophone, and I played piano for 20 years. So I've always been intrigued by how it's made. And I think that curiosity that curiosity is now within my photography, where I now am curious with how something is made. I'll take an image from a magazine or a movie or something, and I'll try and dissect it. I'm looking at the composition. What is the story being told? How does it make me feel? Where is the light coming from? What type of light are they using? Even trying to question why did they make this choice in the lighting, the composition, and all that stuff, or the colors, or the color theory, or the color grading. Because it's that curiosity that also helps develop one's style, and it keeps you going.
Yeah, I actually was watching. Like, my wife and I were trying to find something to watch last night, and I found myself just like as the streaming services, as the trailer kind of like starts playing, I was noticing the color grading. In each one, I was like, "Oh, this film is using this sort of color grading." Like, it kind of gets me. I don't need to watch that because I kind of knew more about what the style of the film was going to be like based on how they color graded it. With all the other information, I was like, "Yeah, no, I don't think I need that today," because you learn so much about like what people like moods that people set via color grading. And I'm like, okay, well, they're kind of trying to sell it as this, but the color grading tells me something different. And I've been fooled too many times by trailers that are cut to get as many people to watch it and not necessarily what the film is actually about. So what we talked about this before, and I think this was a very good next step in these topics is, what are some exercises that you would recommend people do to help find or define their style?
For me, and I think that these are tools I give people who have those pick my brain sessions with me, or mentees, or whatever you want to call them, unofficial mentees. I start with just, when you see something, stop. When you see something that strikes your attention, stop and question why it makes you feel whatever it is that you feel, whether it be good or bad. And question, why does it make you feel that way? How does it make you feel that way? And then from there, begin to study that as a means to communicate visually your message.
There's something that's called a thought record. It's used in therapy a lot. I find it very helpful in what you're talking about. It's like when you see something, you write down like what, like you analyze your feelings, where it started, and how it sort of evolved, and like what was the factor that that caused it. I think that like that sort of analysis is something that, some people aren't taught to do.
Yeah. There's just some scents that bring back memories. If I smell smoked meat, like long smoked ribs or something, it brings back memories of being at home and growing up with my grandparents and my grandfather on summer days would sometimes wake up around 5 a.m. and start grilling food or smoking food. And by the time I woke up around 6:30 or 7 o'clock or even later, I would just those scents. And so every time I smell it, it brings back great memories. And likewise, when I see certain things visually, it brings back good memories. But also, it doesn't always have to be a good memory. It could trigger an emotion that's not always good, but whatever you have seen, it has triggered something. And I think it's from there that we start to say, okay, why? And the analyzation. And so that's one thing, is that thought record. But then another thing that I would do that is very practical, and we've already talked about it, is photo books. Another thing that is very practical is just practicing daily. I once did one of those 365-day projects, and it was great. And for those of you who are listening who don't know what a 365-day project is, it's basically every day you're photographing something, and there's different prompts. You can Google 365-day photo prompts, and it'll give you different prompts. But just the practice is something that will help refine and improve your artistry. Sometimes I will go out with a certain lens set in a certain aperture or a certain shutter speed, and then just challenge myself. Most recently, it was I'm going out with, I think it was a 35 or 24 at f8 and ISO 100, and my shutter is 200. In certain areas, that was too bright, and I had to say, I can't change anything. What can I do?
What can I shoot?
Yeah. And so limitations are sometimes good, says the person with, good Lord. I don't want to count the cameras in this office.
Yeah, I mean, but, you can't. They're sitting behind me. There's like at least a dozen film cameras from my like vintage camera collection, and then like the digital cameras. But yeah, like we had discussed this last time, is limitations can really be like can force you to think more creatively. Whether it's
certainly,
I'm only going to use one lens, and I might be able to change other things, or I'm going to, like you were saying, you're like getting it down to like all of my settings are set, and I just have to find what can fit in here and how to tell a story. And I have always found, like, when I'm talking to people and they're like, I want to learn how to do XYZ and to tell a story doing it, like, how do you get such great reactions of people? And I'm like, well, it's you learn to watch people. Like I was saying, you have to become a professional people watcher and being a student of human nature. Go out and watch them. But the thing is, I always say, like, think of it like you've only got one roll of film, and you might be limiting yourself on like the film speed or aperture or whatever other limitations you want to put on it. But like you've only got 24 or 36 exposures at total, not like what you're going to pick out at the end and to make your story. It's like, no, you only get that many exposures, and that forces you to think so carefully about every image that you take, and to be so conscious of what am I putting in this frame, and what am I, what is the story that I'm telling? And that limitation really forces you to think creatively about what you're doing.
You can pick up one of these now cheap. It's the Canon for, if this is just an audio podcast, it's the Canon AE1, or you don't even have to get a film camera, but disciplining that down and treating it like it's a roll of film, and people watching and anticipating, is this the actual moment that I want to capture? Should I wait? And yeah, of course you'll fail, but that's part of the process.
Right.
Oh, I should have waited a split second later, or I should have waited, or I should have never made this composition, or I should have framed it differently. But that failures are part of the process as well.
Or I should have dedicated, I'm going to use 3 frames in trying to get this moment that's happening between them, because I know that one isn't just going to do it, but I'm willing to give up, X number of frames to get that one moment because I know it's that important. So I might take 3 exposures or whatever it is out of my 36 or 24 because I know how important that particular moment is. Yeah, you don't have to have a film camera, but like I've got a ton of them, and I, occasionally take my film cameras out just
especially with Kodak recently saying that the film cost is going up. I believe it was 30%.
Yeah.
That announcement just came out this week. I was like, good Lord, I'm so grateful that I use digital.
I had a potential client ask me recently, they said, do you do film? And I said, yeah, it's an add-on and it costs a lot of money because it's just like a whole, like I got to have my film. I got to get it developed and processed. But also just like I have to carry film cameras as well as my digital stuff because I'm not going to shoot the whole day on film. That's not my style anymore. I used to do that, but it's just not, like that is an extra. It is an extra, and I will only shoot it during I'll shoot like 2 or 3 rolls, and then it's like more on top of that if you want that. But I also only shoot black and white film.
Yeah.
If it's color, I don't see the point in shooting film as opposed to digital. For me, that's my own like snobby nature in that sense. Like if you want, you can I don't know, you can get that stuff if it's for a wedding. I'd rather if I'm shooting color, just shoot it digitally.
Yeah, I get it. I certainly get it.
Yeah, but like limiting yourself in whatever way you can, and then just like giving, like, it doesn't have to be people, even like creating a story at the shop, like when you go shopping. A
color story.
Yeah.
A story on light, how light hits, a good story is how does light hit the Capitol at different times of day?
Yeah.
I mean, because I live in DC, I know the answer, but it doesn't have to be the Capitol. It could be the market store near you, or how does light hit the coffee table in your house at different times of day? That soft light, that hard light, that back light, that front light, and just make stories of that. So you don't have to go far. You don't have to have an expensive camera. You can use the camera on your phone. There's really no excuse for people besides the ones they give you or you give yourself. But you can always make a photo of something inside your house, or you can go out into the neighborhood.
Yeah, you can you can find things. I used to in New York. I actually did that. Like I did like lighting at different points in the day. I had a day job. I was working, and I'd just like take my camera and I would like take pictures in the morning, before like on my way to work, at lunch, when I went outside, and then after work when we were getting to like close to sunset and how the sun hit different buildings in that area around where I worked. And then kind of like, when I got back home, the sun sort of like setting in my neighborhood each day. And just like that was my like sort of personal project, was taking all these pictures of, how the light hit these buildings differently, different times a day. And also like going in, like you said, color story, like find the same colors in different locations. Like there's all sorts of things you can do to kind of like find and refine your style. And like especially when you're starting out, it's very important. But also as you keep going, especially if you're a professional photographer and you start to feel like you can get to points in your career where you feel like you've painted yourself into a corner with your style. It's a trap you can easily fall into. And I think that's why it's important to do those things where you limit yourself and you have to force yourself out of having all that equipment, having all that. It's really easy to fall back on gear as sort of a crutch. Like, well, I'm going to, now I'm going to get my other lens. I'm like, no, you have to shoot it with this. Like, what if you got stuck on a job and all you have is this lens? You got to make things work. And
what if you're on a wedding and your 35 millimeter breaks because you dropped your camera and all you have left is your 50 and your 85, me in October?
Like the thing is, I could shoot an entire wedding with 50. There are times when I feel like I love my 35 and my 135. I'm really mad that Canon discontinued that lens, 135 f2. It's like super light, great. Like it's so clean and wonderful. I'm like, oh man, of course they decided to discontinue that. And I think they maybe made a new one for the R series for like the mirrorless. I think they may have just put another one out, but I'm like, it's not gonna be any better. It's gonna be heavy. I need that lightweight.
Yeah.
I need that lightweight. I'm getting old. So any last bits of advice for photographers out there who are either looking to sort of establish their style or maybe are questioning the style that they're shooting in right now?
Explore. I think it would just be reiterating everything that we've conversed about during this podcast. But, and then we don't need to do that, just listen again, but just explore, narrow down, refine. Yeah.
My advice,
just have fun with it.
Yeah. My advice would be curious.
Yeah.
Like, I think the biggest like roadblock that people run into is they stop being curious or thinking that they have such a great grasp on what it is they're doing that they don't need to question it, and that they've figured it out. Like, I've got my lighting setup that I use every time, and that it works fine for me. Like, that's when you sort of begin to become stagnant. And I feel like, I've seen it happen in my own work. I'm not going to like say that I've seen it happen to other people because, maybe they have or maybe they haven't. Like, there are people who I definitely go like, well, all their photos kind of look the same now. But I was doing the same thing at points in my career where I was sort of, especially like I'd say like in the 5 to 10 year range, where I really got into like, okay, I've got to come back and revisit this every now and then and give it a, some sort of like shock to the system that, and question what I'm doing as opposed to just accepting it for whatever it is. Do you have your own website? Are you tired of dealing with slow loading pages and poor support from your current web hosting company? Consider switching to SiteGround, the top-rated web hosting company that provides 24/7 support and super fast hosting speeds. SiteGround's platform is built on the premium Google Cloud infrastructure, ensuring top reliability, security, and speed for your website. Their fast network and storage provide optimal site speed and a high level of redundancy, so you can trust that your website will be up and running smoothly at all times. With SiteGround's ultra-fast server setup, your pages will load 30% faster on average, giving your visitors a better user experience and improving your website's SEO. And with hosting starting from just $199 per month, it's affordable for any budget. Plus, if you're not completely satisfied, SiteGround offers a 30-day money-back guarantee. Don't suffer with a terrible web hosting company any longer. Make the switch to SiteGround and experience top-level support, super fast hosting, and a reliable, secure platform for your website. I spent years with a web hosting company that was absolutely terrible. My site was constantly getting hacked and support was nearly impossible to get a hold of. Since switching to SiteGround, all of those problems are in the past. Just visit nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/SiteGround or click the link in the episode notes to get started and begin enjoying faster, more reliable web hosting today. Hey. And now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. This is always death. Sunglasses, now used generally to protect your eyes or as a fashion statement, were originally designed from quartz in the 12th century in China. Do you know why they were developed in the 12th century in China?
Why?
To mask a judge's reactions to testimony. That when people were like coming to be judged for like they had broken the law or done something or whatever, and they came before a judge, they would put sunglasses on so that they couldn't read their eyes and how they were reacting to the story.
Wow.
So you couldn't say like,
wow.
So you couldn't change your story like by reading their reactions and saying like, they're reacting like, but this is actually what happened. Whatever. Like they went in front of these people and they put those glasses on so that people couldn't read what they were saying.
Interesting.
It's fascinating. I think like, oh, that's like 800 years ago. They're like, nope, I gotta make sure they can't see, they can't read my face.
Antique Ray-Bans.
Yeah, those are some really antique Ray-Bans. Smoky quartz. Myron, thank you for coming on. Really appreciate coming
so much
back
for the opportunity,
after
Casey.
my mistake. Let people know where they can find you. Where can they find you on the interwebs if they want to see your work?
You can find me on the interwebs on Instagram at Mfields Photography, Mfields Photography, and of course my website, which is www.mfieldsphotography.com.
All of that information will also be in the episode notes. Myron, thanks again. It's been great.
Thanks so much, Casey.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed my talk with Myron Fields. You can find Myron's details in the episode notes. Please go and follow him. While you're there, you can also find lots of free ways to help support the podcast, such as telling other people about the show or leaving a review. The Nerdy Photographer is currently the #1 photography podcast on Good Pods, as well as being in the top 100 visual arts podcasts on Apple Podcasts in the United States, Canada, Australia, and Ireland, because of listeners like you leaving reviews. So if you haven't left one already, please do that for me. That's awesome. And if you have, thank you so much. You can also follow along on social media at The Nerdy Photo on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Reddit. That's at The Nerdy Photo. The Nerdy Photo. Now let's see how the locals are doing. Let's see those photos, everybody. Okay, well, these all look pretty similar.
Oh, look at that. Oh.
You all use the same preset. Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Looks like I have my work cut out for me here, folks. Until next time, stay safe and stay nerdy.
Who's that coming back to town? You better start listening. Who's your heart been beating about? You better listen.
Do you enjoy listening to your entertainment? Why am I asking? You're doing it right now. You must. With Audible, you can enjoy all of your audio entertainment in one place. From bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, mysteries and thrillers, motivation, wellness, business, and more. Audible has an incredible selection of audiobooks across every genre. But that's not all. Audible also offers exclusive Audible originals from top celebrities, renowned experts, and exciting new voices in audio, plus thousands of podcasts from popular favorites to exclusive new series. And with the Audible app, it's easy to listen anytime, anywhere, whether you're out taking photographs of landscapes, editing pictures in your studio, or going on intergalactic adventures with the Nerdy Photo Crew. You can listen to your favorite audiobooks and podcasts wherever you want. Right now, I'm going through Frank Herbert's Dune Saga once again. The world of these books is so rich and deep with history, I come back over and over and over. New members can try Audible free for 30 days. So what are you waiting for? Go to audibletrial.com/nerdyphoto and sign up for Audible today and discover your next favorite listen. That's audibletrial.com/nerdyphoto.